Hey guys, I wanted to be able to share some shortened clips from a conversation I was able to have with counselors Stephanie Castle and Paul Ober from Refining Grace Counseling. I hope these clips are helpful, but I also want to encourage you. These shortened YouTube clips might be helpful, and I hope they are, but they can't provide the ongoing help and assistance that you need to deal with serious issues like addiction, anger, anxiety, depression. And so I want to encourage you to head to tpcc.org/care or /counseling. We've put some resources together there, including a list of vetted counselors who we trust to get that ongoing support that you need to deal with issues that are complex like this. So again, head to tpcc.org/care or /counseling, and I hope these clips are helpful to you. Tell me a little bit about, if we transition on to the next topic, we're going to be talking about addiction. And so I know this is a huge, huge thing and so prominent in my own family and so many families around us. What are just some basic thoughts, tips, ideas about the idea of addiction, whether it's our own or people in our family?
In the topic of addiction, I would say in my practice that if it's heavy substance abuse, such as alcohol or stronger substance, that they would need greater assistance. Is that where they might need, like, for example, Fairbanks or inpatient treatment? Um, but I also don't want to say I don't deal with addiction, because the idea of some alcohol, some marijuana, some definite pornography, can I even say maybe eating or goal setting? I think there's different ways to think about what our addictions can be. Definitely talk about those. So sometimes I would say the bent of my practice would be more on addiction to pornography. And if I can go into that topic, I think of addiction in some terminologies of, like, you heard the idea of halt. If you're hurting, angry, lonely, or tired, that's when you're more likely to be susceptible to giving into that addiction. And a lot of times that addiction is an escape to there's something about life that is traumatic or just not something you're enjoying, so you try to avoid, get out. And so I think one of the things I very much strongly talk with people about is the idea of, how do I engage my world instead of avoiding it? And so if the tagline I use often is, if pornography is selfish, my selfish desires, my escapism, how can I be selfless and still go engage with my family, my friends, my coworkers, so I'm not so indulgent of myself? And I think it's good grounding for any addiction work. But Stephanie, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I would say too, when you think of addiction, we often think of the physical component that goes with some addiction, like alcoholism, where you've got some withdrawal symptoms and all of that to manage, and there may be a detox situation, and we certainly aren't equipped as a practice to do that. And so I would echo what Paul said about referrals. But the goal is to create a lifestyle that is healthy, and that means support systems from a lot of different places. And sometimes that includes us. I do a lot of family work with families that have an addict in the family, and trying to figure out how to heal those relationships or manage boundaries around that. Sometimes it's people who have an adult addict that's their child, an adult child, or maybe a spouse or a sibling. And we talk a lot about that. And there's a good book called Addictive Thinking that I often refer people to, that talks about the destructive thought patterns that go with addiction, entitlement, and rationalization. Rationalization, they would say, is giving good reasons for behaviors, not true reasons. I often say that when you're addicted to something, you kind of drink your own snake oil. Like what you're telling other people, you kind of believe yourself. It's a form of denial and process where all roads lead to the destructive behavior. And that takes a lot of work to get out of that. It's not just quitting the behavior, but it's dealing with all of those tentacles that want to pull you back toward that behavior. It's a lot of dealing with emotion and thought patterns. And so I really like that particular book for dealing with that. And a lot of times I will have people use that as a companion to our therapy in dealing.
That's so good. And there's so much there just in the Paul, what you said, the HALT acronym: hurt, angry, lonely, tired. Did I get that right? So, I mean, thinking in terms of what we're experiencing in the midst of this pandemic, and, how many restrictions, how much isolation is happening out there, how many losses people are suffering, and, the fatigue, the weariness that develops in the midst of all this change, all this like emotionally heavy things that are happening right now. And so to think, if we're susceptible to addiction and addictive behaviors and addictive thinking, like Stephanie said, when we're hurt, angry, lonely, tired, how much more susceptible we all are, and not just in things we might think of in terms of, like you said, alcohol or drugs, but pornography, anything, eating, could be a unhealthy relationship. There could be so many different things that we can kind of fall into that addictive thinking to kind of try to cope and escape.
Can I add this too? I think when people are trying to break those addictions, there's this mindset of zero is the goal, right? Zero
Mm-hmm.
drinks, zero porn, zero whatever. And if you're being honest with yourself, if it was, for example, if you're looking at porn 10 times a week, now go to zero, and you've been doing that for the last 10 years, that's a monumental jump. And I am convinced that the concept of guilt and shame, they don't help you. They keep you stuck. And I think there's a very spiritual component to that. But I think spiritual battle of conviction, if the Holy Spirit's convicting you to change, that'll motivate you. So what I'm saying is, if we want to celebrate successes, well, if it was 10 times a week and this next week it's only 5, that's not great, but it's not nothing. It is success. It is moving. So one of the things I talked to a lot of people about, it sounds kind of different, but the idea of delayed gratification. So let's say after work, I want to go get that vodka and drink up a bit. Well, instead of going by the grocery store, if you wait 10 minutes, instead you read, you pray, you talk to a friend, all those accountability, good concepts, and then you still have that desire. If you gave in, at least you delayed it for 10 minutes. And notice that's even a small increment of taking back control, which is the key. So maybe this week it's 10, next week it'll be 20 minutes. Next, instead of being 5 times, I mean 2 times. That is progress. And I think we need to celebrate progress instead of condemn, not perfection.
Yeah, and I think, you're looking at relapse too versus just staying in the addiction. Sometimes people, if they fail to not be zero, they want to throw the towel in. Like that addictive thinking comes in that says, see, you can't do it, so don't try. And the goal is to keep getting back up. The more you get back up and keep trying, the more you create some resiliency inside yourself and increase your delayed gratification. So yeah, we talk a lot about that and how not to use guilt and shame when you are struggling. The goal is to learn from it. What are you learning from your relationship with that destructive substance when you fall short? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about God's grace. Let's talk about how do we prepare for the next time so that you're not going to be as susceptible.
Well, like I said before, head to tpcc.org/care or /counseling to see resources that would be helpful, and also to see a list of vetted counselors who we trust to give you more ongoing support to walk through issues as complex as this. Don't be ashamed about getting help. We all need it, and you can't do life alone. So again, head to tpcc.org/care or /counseling to get more help and walk with Jesus through this season.